downtown, the air war over Hanoi, continuing here in turn 17. I did the full turn playthrough in 16, expecting there to be fireworks, and there largely weren't. I mean, there was plenty of fire, there was plenty of surface-to-air missile fire and anti-aircraft fire, and a bombing run, which was quite good. So it was all pretty cool, but not quite the mayhem that I'd anticipated. This bombing run by the Americans continues. The first bombing run was made by these A6 intruders here, this flight, and they have put some electro-optical guided bombs on target with a 2 effect. Not a great roll, but they've got some on target and are now turning to try and get away. All these fire cans opened up at them, and they had some surface-to-air missiles fired at them and some flak, and it all missed. Terrible shooting, and they got away scot-free. However, this flight here, Phoenix, another flight of A6 intruders, started their bombing run, were opened up on by some SAMs just as they were about to start dropping their bombs, and those SAMs were dangerous enough that they had to take evasive maneuver, and that means that they have to turn into a hex, in other words, leave the bombing run. So they've lost their opportunity to bombs, they had to jettison their bombs, they had to descend an altitude band, so they've been put off their bombing run by the surface-to-air missile fire, and they'll now just be trying to get back on their flight path and heading for home. But before that happens, they will undergo some medium flak in this hex, because when you're on the hex side that they've had to move into in their evasive manoeuvres, they still count as in either of these hexes. And they've had to drop an altitude band into low, so they are still in quite a lot of danger as we make a roll for them for the anti-aircraft fire. So let's just do a quick roll over here. Oof, 17. Wow. Let's have a look. Medium. Altitude is low. Medium, needed a 15 to hit. So that's a hit from this flak under here into this hex, and let's try some damage. So over here on the damage table, it's a barrage. They're basically needing 12s or more to do anything, and the modifiers, well, it's medium flak is a +1. The target was on a bombing run, but I'm not going to say it is now, because it's been forced to take evasive manoeuvres. So it stopped its bombing run because of the SAM attack. So I'm going to say no. Target speed, no. No AAA suppression. There is line of sight to the target. So it's purely a +1 for the medium flak. Let's give this a roll, see what happens. And that is a 12, +1 is 13. 13 on here with a barrage is a D result. That's a damage. Damage is, so we find a table which tells us what to allocate that damage to. We roll a dice on that table. There are 4 aircraft in the flight. We get a 5, we cross-reference 5, and it says aircraft number 3 out of 4 is damaged. So there we go. Phoenix. So this guy here, Phoenix, and aircraft number 3 is damaged. Wow. I've got two more bombing flights coming in. I won't do these in as much detail unless something happens. Well, the bad news for the Americans just keeps racking up, and coming from the most unlikely sources as well. This SAM that had flicked back on and managed to get a partial acquisition on this flight here opened up with its last missiles, its last point of ammo, so a couple of missiles that it had left as this flight tried to move away, hit it with a 17. The SAM defense roll was a 4, that was nowhere near good enough. So the SAMs were on target, and the damage roll was an 8, which even with partial acquisition down here on this table is a K result. That is a kill. Now we find the table which tells us which planes have been lost. So again, the damage allocation table here, they're all undamaged. So we get a 10. It's 4. C result, allocate the damage to a crippled aircraft, but there are no crippled aircraft, so it's just number 4. That was flight 308 using its first movement points. Sorry, can't be 308, must be 208. Yeah, this one here, the A4C's coming in on their bombing run. So number 4 has gone. Shot down. Oops. This is getting really, really bad for the Americans, because that means they have to make a morale check to see whether they even just stay on the bombing run. And that means we have to do a few other bits that I've not shown before. But so firstly, we're going to roll on the flight quality table to find out how good this flight is. So they have got an 18. That's pretty amazing. 18 in terms of quality. So they are regular, they've rolled an 18. Okay, that's a +1 on their aggression. So we'll mark them down. So officers a +1 on their aggression rating. And now we have to make a morale check for them because they've taken damage from SAM or anti-aircraft fires. So we'd be on this table here, SAM. So you can see they only need a 6 or more on 2 dice. But the modifiers are their flight aggression value, which we've just calculated as +1, and friendly aircraft shot down is a -3, so they're on a -2 on 2 dice. They've got an 8, -2 is a 6, and that just about does it for them. 6 or more is no effect. 1 less and they'd have had to jettison their bombs, which would obviously have ended their hopes of a bombing run. So there it is. That's another casualty, and this flight now continues forward, and this is going to be the end of all the movement in turn 17, which again a very, very costly turn for the Americans. And at turn 18 here at downtown, and the Americans have finished all their bombing runs. You can see that they've managed to skirt round the rules requiring them to stay on the mission, the designated sort of mission route, by just aborting those flights because they've got no ordnance, and they could do the same with these, but gives them a bit more freedom actually to move. So I'm not sure whether that's a particular flaw in the rules, but anyway, they'll end up going roughly where they'll end up following roughly the planned route anyway. Yeah, not good bombing though from the Americans. Obviously one of the A6 intruders had to veer off course because of a SAM strike and jettisoned its bombs, and those were the bombs they were really relying on to hit the target. I didn't realise how tough this target was to hit, but it had an A rating in terms of its defences, which is really, really tough. That's a -3 on the dice. Its target profile was A, so it's really well dug in. And that, combined with some flak and the fact that it's level bombing and the altitude, was giving them something like -8 on the dice. One bomb strike, this guy's bombs completely missed. Luckily for him, didn't cause any collateral damage, which would have been VPs for the DRV. The other one, I think, put a 1 damage marker down. So they've got a 1 damage marker and a 2 damage marker under here. There's the 1 damage marker. And that's all she wrote. All the fire cans around here completely, and all the anti-aircraft artillery that could fire, completely failed to hit the target. So no damage there, despite it probably being the most dangerous stuff around. It's been random SAM site pot shots that have done the damage. Anyway, that's where we're at, and now the Americans are just looking to get out of here, but obviously they have to try and get a recon flight in, and they don't want to get mugged while they're leaving the area, so they still have some fighter patrols and things quite heavily active in the area, because they don't want to get the recon flight, for example, shot down. That would just crown off a completely miserable day's work for them. Okay, I've kind of forgotten what I filmed last, but doesn't matter. Things are winding down here. Some A4s managed to take out a SAM site completely with some cluster bombs, just as a sort of bit of vengeance. And over Hanoi, the bombers have now managed to turn away without taking any more losses or damage from anti-aircraft fire, and are now pretty much out of the immediate danger. The Vietnamese have virtually no ammo left in any of their SAM sites, so there's not much more threat around. I don't think. There may be one SAM site with some missiles, but by and large there's not much more threat. And I know for a fact that the DRV do not want to get planes entangled with the Americans right now and just lose VP for getting their planes shot down. So they're going to still keep their flights well out of the way of the Americans. Any real planes anyway. And what that means is that things are just going to sort of slowly calm down again as the American flights just drift off back up towards their exit point. The only thing they've got to do now is get the recon flight over Hanoi, and given that they don't know whether or not there are enemy aircraft around, some fighters will have to loiter around just to protect that. But so I'm going to rip through 4 or 5 turns probably quite quickly now, just to finish off, and only drop in on this if there is something major that happens, like some decent SAM shots or something like that. I've moved forward to turn 23 here in downtown air war over Hanoi. You can see most of the American planes' flights are drifting off back towards their exit point, right up over here. The last thing that's happening is that the recon flight here is dashing over the target to try and assess the damage. He's at high altitude and he's just announced a speed 7 move, so he's burnt some fuel to move 7. Very fast recon plane. He's just spent his 3rd movement point, and this fire can has opened fire on him, and at high altitude needs a 14 to hit, and there's a 14 to hit, which means that we are now rolling damage. The target defensive jamming on one of these vigilantes is 3, so there's a -3 for the jamming, and he's moving at speed 5 or more, so that's another -2. So there's a total of -5 on this roll, but still it's not comfortable when you're recon flight that you're relying on to score any points at all is getting shot at like this. There's the damage roll. That's also a 14. with a -5 is a 9, and that's not going to do anything. He's got to survive a couple more of these, because now for his 4th movement point he's got to come in here, and now this fire can and this fire can open fire on him, and we can have some medium flak on him as well. So we've got 3 shots at him. Let's do the first fire can. These are both rolling 14s to hit. First one gets a 14, and that is a hit. Damage roll again with a -5. That's not going to do anything, an 8. The second fire can's rolling a 14 to hit. Gets an 11, and then we've got some medium flak, needs a 19 to hit, and that's a 15. Okay, so he survived the flak there on his. He survived that on his 4th movement point. Okay, so I think that's all these 3 fire cans have shot at him now. So now he moves into here to recon the site. And we're just going to have some medium flak at him, so that's another go, and that's going to miss. Okay, now he's going to roll into here for his 6th movement point and take a free 30-degree turn. But while he does that, I think we could have some light flak at him, but light flak can't hit high altitude, so he's safe from that. And then he's going to come in here for 7 and make a free 30-degree turn out there like that. The other thing that we need to do is, because he's had anti-aircraft fire at him, he would now be visually identified. So we could change his marker for an RA5, which I'm going to find one and do it. It's pretty much irrelevant at this stage, but it's something I've not been showing on camera. I have, as you can see, been moving planes to identified state where they've been fired at or where that would occur. So that would happen, but he's survived the anti-aircraft fire from Hanoi, and that is pretty much the game done. There's not much else that really can happen here. Both the DRV fighter flights have been aborted, so they're both now landed, one down there and one up there. The SAM sites are out of ammo, and the US flights have no reason to overfly any anti-aircraft artillery, so we're pretty much reaching the end here. It'll be done in a couple more turns. So turn 29, when the last US flight leaves the board, and all we've got to work out now is the damage to the target and therefore the final outcome of the raid. It's been a pretty rough ride for the Americans. They've lost 3 planes, they've lost 4 crewmen. It's all a bit of a disaster, so the only saving grace for them would be if one of these attack markers had actually done some damage to the target. So we're going to roll that out now. We've got a 2 and a 1, and you basically roll everything and you get the best of your rolls. So we'll roll on the 2 column here on the damage table for the Americans. Let's see what that is. And that's a 5. That's dreadful. Absolutely dreadful. So a 5 is no effect. And they've got a roll on the 1 column. And they've got another 5. And that may be even worse. No, that's no effect. I mean, neither of those are a collateral damage. So 2 no effects on the target. They have done absolutely nothing to the Yen-Vien rail yard in that raid, and those 2 damage markers can come off the board. So, final victory points then. Calamitous. The US have scored. The target was underlined as well, so they'd have got 12 victory points for destroying it, but they end up with nothing. So no damage, 0. No MiGs shot down. 1 SAM battalion damaged and 1 SAM battalion destroyed, for a total of 3 points for the Americans. The DRV, no bomb damage assessment of the target. Well, there was the Recon flight flew over. Fighters lost 3, so that's 6 points for them. Crews lost 4, that's another 4 points for them. That's 10. No collateral damage or zone violations. So 3 US points, 10 DRV points is a total of -7. Significant defeat. US objectives were not achieved, and Hanoi proclaims a great victory over the Yankee air pirates. Attacks into the upper route packs halt temporarily to evaluate lessons learned. Indeed they do. Yeah, well, lessons learned then. Let's have a think about that. I think we probably overcomplicated the plan significantly by coming on over the ocean here and swinging towards Haiphong and then cutting south, because we could have simply come on at this point here and had a straight run in, straight down across here at the target with absolutely no complications at all. So in my previous game, the sort of DRV fighters had done a lot of damage to the bombers, and we were kind of expecting more fighter resistance, and this time around the DRV went for an entirely SAM and anti-air based strategy and didn't have any plans to use their fighters at all apart from as bait or distractions. And what that meant was that this feint towards Haiphong didn't draw any fighters in. Had the target been Haiphong and the DRV had spent significant points on fighters, they'd have been trying to get them into the fray because they cost VPs. And that's something I just forgot. The DRV had spent 2 points on bonus fighters to buy some MiG-21s and 2 VPs, so it's only -5, but still that's a significant defeat. Terrible. Yeah, so the DRV could have come in here and had a very simple straight route down to the target, turned around and flown back again. That would have lessened their exposure to SAM sites and stuff, because they wouldn't have been flirting with Haiphong. And as it happened, they did lose an aircraft to a SAM shot out of Haiphong, so that was bad. And they could also have come in at high altitude and not have been suffering these anti-aircraft ambushes on the deck, which did for an aircraft down over here over the coast. So yeah, that was 2 unnecessary aircraft losses just by messing around Haiphong instead of just coming in, going at the target and getting out again. That still wouldn't have been great, because that would have been, well, that would have saved them 5 or 6 VPs maybe, possibly in terms of crew, and that would have been putting them up somewhere around, still a defeat, but you know, not quite as bad as it was. So the other lesson learned here is that this game changes dramatically depending on the random roll that the Americans get for their target. If they get an outlying target of some farm down over here, you get a phenomenally different game from if they have to bomb downtown Hanoi. Just a totally different game. So if you play this as a one-off, you might come away a bit disappointed or wondering how one side or the other is meant to do anything, because, you know, the Americans roll in, blow something up over here and roll off again. Or they come in here and get shredded by, you know, anti-aircraft fire and missiles and God knows what else. It can change quite radically. It's very interesting and really good fun, and I don't hold that against it. I'm just saying, be aware that your target role is probably the most important role of the game. It's certainly going to define what kind of game you're going to get. But really enjoy this, and I want to try others in the series. I've got Elusive Victory, which is the Arab-Israeli Wars. There was another one, Bloody April, which was World War I, which I don't have, and I'm not super convinced that I want to play this system as a World War I game. I'm far more interested in the 80s Cold War gone hot version, which is currently being P500 by GMT. I think it's called Red Storm, and that's a sort of 1987 version where Obviously now you've got very, very modern, up-to-date technology on both sides, and MiG-29s against, you know, Tornadoes and F-15s and all kinds of craziness, and very, very potent, anti-aircraft artillery and SAM technology on both sides. That's on P500, so it probably won't see the light of day for another year. But at the rate I play this, that may well be my next game of it.